Hi, it's Mark from Nomad Boatbuilding, and welcome back to the 2.4 meter project. Now today we are going to install the rudder tube. And whenever you're getting into sort of longer projects, there's always some detail that you need to get done before you can do the next one. I mean, that's part of building stuff. But once in a while you get something that kind of haunts you, and you have to keep considering it over and over again at different aspects of the build. And the rudder and the components that comprise the rudder system is one of those things. And the rudder tube is definitely one of those items. And finally, we get to install it. And that means now that it's installed, we can move into other stuff like putting the flotation in, putting in the subdecks, all sorts of other little things like that. So without further ado, let's go get that thing installed. Sit back and enjoy, and I'll take care of the work.
Now I need to take care of something before I can move ahead, and that is dealing with our rudder tube. So we built this out of fiberglass and epoxy, and it needs to get fastened to our keelson here, or this is our horn timber to be more precise. So I've drilled a hole up from the bottom. We actually had it in one spot and decided to shift it forward a hair to give us a little bit more clearance, so I had to move it about 1/8 of an inch further forward. So I've drilled a new pilot hole to follow, and essentially we're going to have this little bulkhead sitting right here, and this comes out square to the horn timber, and then we've got to come up with sort of a bracing affair that's going to come around this. So what I want to do right now is just bore a hole big enough into here that this can drop in. And I need to bore a second hole that's a bit smaller for the actual rudder shaft, which is about 1 inch in diameter. So I'll follow the same pilot hole right through to the outside, but I wanted to give myself a little bit of wiggle room, because if I'm not careful, I could create a situation where the rudder wants to bind. So I'm going to give this some slop. I'm going to bore through it for the rudder, and then I got to figure out a way to sort of prop the rudder up into position through here, drop this tube on, and then we'll just sort of tack it in place with some epoxy till it's rigid, and we'll tack it in place to our bulkhead. And then after that's tacked, I can pull that rudder out and I can do a proper job bonding it in place. So that's my plan right now. We're just going to use a Forstner bit, and I've gone a little oversized here. So I could make it right exact size, but this is maybe like 1/8 of an inch larger. And I think that's just about the right amount of slop. The real trick here is I just want to go nice and square, although I've got the wiggle room, which is why I've gone oversized. Just want to go nice and square to the surface. And one good way of figuring that out when you're using Forstner bits is just looking for the scratches it leaves as you get started. If it's square, it starts to scratch around the whole perimeter at the same time. There we go. So I think maybe, not sure what I should do, if I should go half and half. The other half is through the keelson and the planking. Yeah, that's maybe not a bad idea. I mean, this is certainly enough meat to hold it for now. Now the trick is drilling the second hole really clean without blowing through the bottom, and I don't quite have a good way to do that. Think about that for a moment. Okay, well, when in doubt, you just got to go old school. So I've got this auger bit here with a spur on it, and I really only need to use this to get this as far as carving a little bit out of the surface of the face of the planking. I hate how large the lead spur is on it, though. It's a bit problematic. Okay, I think I want to come in from the other side a little bit more first. So this is just a plug that I put in, a mahogany plug. You can see how much it's offset from the new hole. So that's how much I wanted to move the hole aft. You can see the original yellow cedar planking right down there at the bottom of that hole. So I'm going to just come through with the auger on the other side now, and we're going to clean that up. We're going to try and pierce through. Okay, let's try this again. There we go. That's what I'm trying to do. I just need to get the spurs for that face grain. Going real slow here. Now the trick is I don't have a lead screw pulling me anymore. The lead screw has finally sort of broken its grip, but the job I needed to do is done, which is just cutting that face grain so I don't break out. So I'm going to come back from the inside now and see if I can get this to cut free. I'm going to keep using the hand auger. Maybe not so much. Maybe not so much. Nice. That came out great. No breakout, just the tiniest bit of fuzz around the edge. That's fine. That makes me happy.
There we go. This will fit in just nice. Plenty of wiggle room. That's perfect. So I need to set my rudder up somehow to get it fixed in position relative to the skeg, so we know exactly where it's going to go, and then I can drop this down over top and then bond it in place and create some sort of little bit of blocking around here to keep this firmly in place. Now, of course, the plywood wrapped around it is probably enough, but it needs something to locate it positively until that plywood is there. So it won't take very much, just the smallest little bit of material, I think, and I'll be pretty satisfied with that. And once that plywood's around it, it'll be rock solid, guaranteed.
Okay, we're going to do our best to try and level this thing up. Looks pretty good. I need to do sort of a dry installation of the rudder. So to do that, I got to figure out a way to align it to the hull. Okay, so my rudder shaft is going to project up through this hole, and this rudder tube is going to go around it. So I've got several things I need to figure out. The first one, I suppose, is attitude of the rudder tube. So I need to drop the rudder in here, drop this tube on, and I need to come up with some sort of blocking that I can glue in place that will allow me to glue this tube in place. I also need to cut the tube off at a particular height. I think I'm not going to worry about that just yet. I think I'd rather worry about getting this aligned first. Before I glue this in, I can cut it down. So I got my rudder shaft here, and I turned this little Delrin bushing. It's going to act, slide down there. It's a super nice tight fit. So it's not exactly intended to act as a gasket, but more as a just to control the position of the rudder against the hull. I might need to try and clean this up a little bit. It's sitting a little bit proud off to one side for some reason, but I'm not too concerned about that. All right, let's get it into position in the hull. So you can see my laser coming up through the hole, and it's right on center there, it looks like, or very, very close to it. I guess I've got to tweak it over just the tiniest hair. It's always hard to tweak it over that much. Okay, look at this. This is super annoying. My stand is in the way
fitting the rudder in here. Which means in order to even fit this, I need to heel the boat over, which throws off my alignment, my leveling. So I'll have to re-level it. It's annoying because I got a laser set up here that's like right bang on the money. Let's see if I swing this over. Okay, that sucks. Now what? All right. So there's that. Now I've also got some material here that I already sized out to shim in here. So the idea is I need to make sure I've got the right spacing here without throwing that out of whack. So that can go in there. Okay, now I'm gonna come up with a way to hold that in place, I think. Need a clamp. Okay. There we go. I'm just gonna spring clamp on the inside. So I got this bit of cork flooring material and a little piece of cereal box. Seems to be the right combination of spacing. It gives us about 3/16 of an inch of wiggle room between the rudder and the skig. That seems to be about right. Take that out. Yeah, I think if I can let that sort of ride up against the skeg, that works. It gives us a nice sort of a 3/8 of an inch spacing in here, give or take a little bit. And that's about right. We don't want it too tight or else we could run into trouble. Now to level things up again and then try and lock that rudder in position. Got all manner of ropes, sticks, keeping this thing under control for the last little while. Alright, that looks good. Let's see if I get this laser set back up now that we've wiggled everything around. So I've got a seam on the bottom of the hull here that I'm trying to center the laser up on. If I can get that nicely aligned with that seam, then at least I know if I project it down the rudder, it's actually looking pretty good. Delicate balance here. Woo! Woo, woo, woo! That looks so good. Oh my gosh. I hope I got that right. Look at that. Right on the heel. Well, I can't help feeling like if the whole back edge of that rudder is being caught by that laser evenly, it must be on center. I only wish I could see that little laser coming out up here now, but obviously I can't. But that's looking pretty darn good. Okay, that rudder is sitting just so perfectly there that I'm afraid to touch it. So what am I going to do? I got to have the clamp there to hold that in place. I think all I can really do is drop this on top and try and come up with a way of fitting something on there, and I don't even know what it is yet.
maybe what I do is I take a piece of plywood, drill a hole just big enough for that, slide it down over top, and then mark where it butts into the bulkhead, and then I could glue it in place, just tab it in there. Or I just make a little piece of a little wedge that goes down in here, glue that in place. I mean, that would be good too. Tough one. Okay, and now I also have put a center line on a couple of deck beams here. All right, so that doesn't 100% land right on the center line. By a little bit. But what's the more important thing here, I wonder? I should double check that that center line is actually on center. That would be smart. Let's do that. Yep, that's good. Okay, I just played around with the rudder just a hair, see if I can, a little tweaking would do anything there. Yeah. I think I'd rather go with letting this be out of off center just a hair. I mean, it's not much. It's such a tiny amount, but it's where the rudder kind of wants to sit. I think I should go with that. I think alignment at the skeg is more important than alignment up here. And if the hull's level and the rudder's plumb and that looks good, there's got to be a little bit of wiggle room somewhere. So I guess this is going to be it. All right, 1.25 inches. 1.25 inches. All right. I know what I'm going to do. All right, so let's just measure back from here. Okay, so there's a bit of blocking here that I made, so I'm going to slide this down. I took this to my drill press on the sander, got a little drum sander, played around with it a little bit, and kind of wobbled out the hole, because this thing is not perfectly cylindrical, and it's not perfectly 1.25 inches. So what I'm going to do is I'm just tracing on the bottom here what the offset is, which is that. I'm just going to take it to the top. And that's how much I need to trim that off. And I think my angle is just 90 degrees pretty much. Compare it against, I want this to nestle up against the bottom of my this little sub deck. So if I squeeze that on there. Okay, can get tilted down just a hair. All right, I'm going to trim this up, and we'll be back in a second. Okay, here we go. Slide that down. That fits pretty good. A little bit of wiggle in this joint. I'm going to tweak the joint just a hair, but I think that will work. Okay, so now I can reduce the size of this. I don't need this thing to be so big. I'll taper this out. Let's get it in a plywood deck over top so it'll get bonded to the deck too. So I don't need a ton of meat here, but I'm going to give it a reasonable amount. And then I think we'll apply glue to the joint, put a bit of blocking on here to clamp the two together, and just glue this to that and call that good. Yeah, because then my alignment's done, and I can screw around all I want with it after that. This thing can't go anywhere. I do need to, I'll have to put the shaft in place to bond it in at the bottom, because it's got some wiggle room there, but that's fine. Okay, that makes me happy. We'll go with that. What's that work out to? It looks like it's Yep, that'll work. Okay. Just going to move that out of the way. Okay, I'm just going to put a little on the boat here. Now, I'm going to smear a bunch here onto our joint. So there we go. Just carefully slide that into place. I might take some of that squeeze out and just try and run a fillet underneath here, but it really doesn't need it. Double check, make sure everything is right on the money. That's, come on. Okay, that's good and plumb. I'm going to check my rudder down here. Yep, actually, rudder looks good. As I swing the rudder down below, what I can see is the tail of it, like up at the upper edge, you can see it swinging off of the laser line, but down at the lower edge, it stays holding in position. So that's a good indication that the rudder is in the right spot. Okay. Now, let's see. I think we're just gonna. I want some smaller clamps. Okay, I just want to be able to grab hold of the edges of this because I want to be able to get underneath there and tool this thing. So there we go. Okay, our little rudder shaft partner is installed now. Glue is all set. Now before I disturb anything, I would like to actually get the tube sized properly in terms of length, and I'd like to bond it in place, I think, or at the very least tack it in place. I'm not 100% sure what I should do here, but I think maybe my best course of action is, let's try flipping that over. Like it's fixed up here in terms of where the tube can go, but down at the bottom there's still some wiggle room. So what I think I want to do, I need to, right now I got my clamp holding my rudder up, so gotta get rid of that. I think I'm gonna shim up the rudder from below or block it up so that I can take that clamp off. I can put on all the gear that has to hold up the quadrant, and then I can work out my tube length because I want that gear to be able to ride on the top of that tube. That's what's going to keep the rudder from falling out ultimately. All right, let's go shim this thing up. Okay, so I think first let's try and figure out a height. All right, so to start with, I'm just going to use a little batten here to mark my overall height. It's going to be the easiest way to figure out what we need to chop off of that tube. Okay, and then I've got this little bushing I made, and the purpose of this is primarily to prevent wear and tear on the top of the tube. So let me just try and get that on there. Oh, I might have to try and shave that down some. That's such a tight fit. Okay. That's a little problematic. I'll work on that slightly separately. Okay, so then we got this little stop collar that's going to go on there. Going to slide on. Yep. And then ultimately we have the quadrant here. Oh, which I have not yet. Did I? No, I don't think I need to bore out the inside of this thing still. Damn it. Let's check our height here. Yeah, so we clear that just fine. Okay, so I do need to bore this out some. I can't get it onto the shaft just yet, so I'm going to have to do this a different way. So I've got my quadrant. That's going to go on like so. I've got a stop collar that's going to prevent the whole thing from slipping. And I got a bushing here, and that's just to prevent wear and tear on the rudder tube. Those things right there need to come off the overall length of our fiberglass tube. Take all three of these items and I just stack them up on here. There we go. And I mark the end of my little stick here. So that is how long my tube needs to be in order to span the distance from inside that shoulder to the bottom of all this gear. So there's my tube, and I need to do a little bit of chopping. So I think what I might do is try and square off one end first and then cut it to length. And I'm thinking the table saw might be the best tool for this, either that or the bandsaw with a fence. Maybe we'll try the bandsaw first. That might be the safer tool to use. Nope. Round things on tools are never good. Okay, that worked well. A bit of a delicate situation. I had to pull the rudder out because I wanted to wet out around that hole. Now the trick is trying to get it all realigned. The way it was. Okay, so there we go. So I think I'm going to actually kind of try and pant a little bit of material down into there. I'm just going to squeeze a little bit into that notch. Now the danger is I don't want to fill in around the rudder shaft itself too much. And I waxed the rudder shaft. That's one of the reasons I pulled it out. Last thing you want to do is find that you can't get the rudder out of this thing once you've assembled all of this. Okay, there we go. So I'm going to try and tool a generous fillet around there. Right now I'm just doing a very sloppy job of daubing a bunch of epoxy around the hole. And we're going to do the same thing up here. I'm just going to throw a pile on there. I'm not going to try and finalize this for a minute. I want to just go over the rudder setup and make sure it's all nicely aligned before I call this done. But if I can get the epoxy in here now this looks super messy, and it is. But the goal is to just stabilize it all. Put a gob around underneath this thing too, so we'll have a really nice solid setup. May not be the neatest looking job when I'm done, unfortunately, so it's really hard to see what's going on up in here. But we'll do our best to clean it up. Okay, I got the laser set up there. Everything is dialed right back in. And now we'll see if we can do a decent tooling job on this without making a total mess out of it. Just going to grab a larger filleting stick and see if I can. That'll work. Might be too big. Too big. All right, I need a slightly smaller one. Having a variety of filleting stick sizes on hand is definitely an advantage. Now this is going to be totally buried, so I don't really have to make it look that neat, but I like it to look that neat. If I can. Come on. Okay, here's a little trick. Got my stick wetted out with alcohol. So there we go, look at that. So that just lubricates it just enough, and the alcohol and the epoxy are just fine together. It'll just flash right off. So it's a bit like when you use a wet finger to try and tool out some silicone caulking. Okay, that looks pretty good down there. I'm not going to improve upon that. Let's see if we can't clean up. I think I need a smaller filleting tool. Nice. All right, and then the top, this top here, I just want to clean that off. So that we're just want it nice and flush. I'm just going to take a rag with some alcohol and gently wipe this down. Okay, that looks good. That looks really good. Get my mirror, I'll take a peek under here, see if I can't tidy up underneath there a little bit. Chances are kind of slim I can do much about it, but it also doesn't really matter. Similar trick. Just going to get my finger gobbed up with alcohol and use it to try and run a fillet around there. How's that look? That's a bit better. That's a bit better. We're done. That looks really good. Oh boy, it's a little bit of a hurdle, and that's great. I'm glad to have gotten over it. So I'm just going to not touch this for the next little while. Okay, there we go. We got just a little under 180-degree swing on these guys. So that should be just fine. You don't want to go that far over anyway, because then you're stalled. Regardless, I almost wonder if I should put stops on it to stop it at a certain position. I'd have to talk to the owner about that. But for the most part, this is looking really good. I'm happy about our results here. It all lines up nicely, and the fit is good. In fact, when I first cracked this, it was very tight, of course, because epoxy squeezed in around the shaft, and made it 100% fit. But that's too tight. We want a little bit of slop. We want it to be able to move freely. The worst thing is if this thing were to jam up while it's sailing. So there's a risk of a little cavitation. But anyway, so I used this little piece of pipe with some sandpaper wrapped around it to just kind of open up that hole just a little bit, just near the back end here, just because we want that little bit of wiggle room. And that's a pretty simple way to do it. You got the right size piece of pipe. And our bushing looks pretty good. It's got good clean contact, it looks like. So I'm happy about that. That'll keep the wear and tear down. And I should probably even loosen up on this guy a little bit more so that it more easily spins freely, so that it's not just wearing one surface out. It's riding on both surfaces. So here we go. That's done. And now I can move on to other jobs on the inside of the boat.
All right, that's it for today, folks. Thank you so much for watching, and I especially want to thank everybody who helps support these videos over on Patreon. If you'd like to be one of those people, please consider joining us by following the link in the corner or down in the description. Now, until next time, get out there, get your hands dirty, and I will see you later.